back, everyone, to the Fly Culture podcast. My name is Pete Titus. My guest today I started talking to him a little while back now about fishing in Spain. He'd written a piece for my online magazine, Eat, Sleep, Fish, and it absolutely fascinated me and led me to making a trip out there. Also, like me, he is a recently retired guide. He has a passion for his home rivers of Yorkshire and beyond. He's a pro team member for Hardy. And he also has a really cool fly time business. And part of me not wanting to tie flies or not having the urge to tie flies, I found his site the other day and bought some of those. So they are mighty fine too. But it is with utmost pleasure that I introduce Stuart Minnikin today to talk about fishing, guiding and all sorts of stuff. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. Stuart, how are you doing?
Hi, Pete. Yeah, I'm doing fine. Thank you. Fine. Yeah. How are you?
Yeah, hanging in there, I think is the best description. I know we were talking off mic, and it is like the longest I've been certainly without fishing. So I can't wait to go and throw a double-handed rod on the 1st of March. I'm really, really looking forward to that. But you're doing okay. You're hanging in there. Are you managing? Are you near enough to be able to do some fishing?
Yeah, I've got nothing in the town where I live, a small town, but probably within a 15-minute drive, I can be on a couple of rivers, and I think I've been fishing for grayling. I think that's acceptable within the rules and with some of the other things that you see. So yes, I've still been making some short journeys in the car to fish for grayling.
And I've kind of forgotten what grayling looks like. It's been so long. Are grayling an important part of your life, an important part of winter fishing for you? Do they sort of rank up there, or do you have a league table, as it were, of favourite species? But would it be grayling are up there for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, really. At one time, I used to probably prefer grayling to trout, particularly once it got to the sort of middle of the summer. I'd be longing for those frosty October, November days that we seemed to get every year at that time. Sort of around about late 90s, early 2000s, we used to get those cold, frosty mornings, but then by lunchtime, the sun was up and it was reasonably warm. And I used to absolutely love that. I used to catch tons and tons of grayling on the Dales rivers, in particular the Ure. Probably the Ure was an unbelievable grayling river. So I experienced it in the late 90s. I think it was even better before that, but when I experienced it, it was unbelievable. So yeah, I used to really look forward to that. And then over a very short period, I would say after sort of 2000 onwards, the grayling just plummeted, particularly on the Ure, but throughout the Dales really, and all the rivers I fished, and it kind of spoiled my fishing really. I think the grayling then took a back seat, and I've been on a downer for a good few years since that. And it's only really over the last few years I've started to fish a couple of different rivers. I do a lot of travelling up to the Scottish borders to go for the specimen grayling, so you're not going to get the numbers, but there's some amazing fish up there, and it's just a nice place to fish actually as well. Just nice to be there. And then I think the grayling, I've probably changed my rivers. I don't fish the Ure so much now, but I've changed my rivers a little bit, and started to find some reasonable numbers of grayling. Started to enjoy it again. It's not quite up there with the trout fishing, particularly spring trout fishing, but yeah, I do enjoy grayling. The only sort of downside for me is as I'm getting older, I feel the cold. I've always felt the cold, but I'm feeling it more and more, and the joints are creaking and screaming at me, and So yeah, I don't like the cold, but if I pick and choose my days, then yeah, I do still enjoy the grayling nowadays. Yeah, long answer to a short question, but that's it.
That's a really good answer too, and I've said on these many times before that part of it for me is meeting up with friends and having it's not like a trout day in that sense, is it? It's a little bit shorter if we're talking the winter grayling. That having been said, while you were describing that, I was kind of thinking of that October, November time when you've still got them rising, and it almost feels like your season's got that little extra couple of months where you're able to cast a dry fly for them, and that's a really fun part of it as well, isn't it? And that little extra couple of months, do you enjoy those ones equally so?
Yeah, definitely. That's it's just a continuation of your trout season, and I read a book. I think it was Reg Regini's book on grayling, And I remember one of the comments in there was how well timed the end of the trout season is. And it literally is. You can go fishing that sort of last day or two in September and you're catching trout. And then you flip over into October and the trout almost overnight disappear. It's like the no, right, that's it, we've done, and they disappear. So yeah, but it's kind of an extension of your trout fishing, but just for the grill. Obviously you do catch no trout, but just for the grilling. And I suppose it's easy fishing in those October, November days. Once you get then into December and into the new year, then it becomes a slog, dragging your bugs along the bottom, trying to find a fish that's feeding. So yeah, it does change, and it's nice, of course, then when you come out of that into spring and you're casting a fly line again, as opposed to just lobbing a team of heavyweight lead and tungsten around.
Yeah, I'm kind of like you. That I guess it's the instructor in me, but I've always done it. That I remember the days when you would fish with just upstream nymphing or whatever it would actually be, and that aspect has always been interesting for me. Is the casting aspect of it, and I found myself before I had stopped fishing that I was starting to change again and fish just with an indicator or an upstream nymph and stuff like that. And like you say, sort of putting off the heavy nymph stuff for as long as I possibly could, or even sacrificing fish in the sense of for the fun way of fishing and still being able to throw the fly line. And it's a fun way to do it, isn't it? And looking at different methods rather than going to default setting for your winter fishing, I guess.
Yeah, there's definitely something. I mean, at the end of the day, that's why I think we go fly fishing, to actually cast the lines. There's something attractive about doing that. But then, like I say, you get to that changeover, almost a changeover day, October, November, December time, when you know it's just not effective, and you've got to adopt different methods if you're going to continue to be successful. I think if you think about before this Euro nymphing came along, we had check nymphing. Check nymphing was probably the only thing that people did the only technique that was out that changed things. So in those days it was just a case of just lobbing your nymphs in there, lifting up and following them through. Nowadays with the Euro nymphing, it's kind of, you can actually get back to casting, can't you, with that? And so it's a bit of a, as you said, a bit of a crossover technique, really. Yeah, you're not casting properly, but you are casting that little bit further with that bit more control. So it's very, very rare now I actually do any sort of full-on check nymphing. It tends to be the Euro style during the winter, but I'm still a big fan of upstream nymphing in the trout season, really, early grayling season, and through the trouts. And I think it's a very, very, in these days, underrated method. Very underrated. I just don't think it's used by enough people.
Do you think that's because the Euro style lends itself really well to quickly, not mastering, but understanding the basics of it? And there may be a little bit more to the upstream nymphing. Do you think there's an element of that, or do you think we're, and part of me during this lockdown is we're reading more, we're doing lots of other stuff, that people are rediscovering things that they didn't do and are saying, yeah, actually, I'm going to do that when I can get back out in the river again?
I think it comes down to fashion, really, for want of a better term. If you go back to when the duo, this New Zealand style Clink and Dink came out, it was one of my biggest frustrations as a guide that's people would come along, and it was the only way they could nymph fish was to use the duo, and everybody did that. And then that led, I suppose, indirectly or even directly, I suppose, into Euro nymphing and things. And it's just the fashion. It's what people do. I suppose it's no different to what we've always done. If someone went out and caught a trout on a cat's whisker, and they told the next person, and they put it in the returns as a cat's whisker, the next person comes along and ties on a cat's whisker. So guess what they caught on? The cat's whisker. So I think it's the same. People write, blog, put on social media about Euro nymphing, so then everybody does it. It's the way you've got to do it. And your older methods, you don't see so many people fishing this duo New Zealand style anymore, and you certainly don't see people just upstream nymphing. I think it's just a fashion. And I think they all have the place. There's days when I wouldn't dream of, not days, but there's certain pieces of river I wouldn't dream of fishing upstream nymph. And equally, there's other bits that are perfectly suited to it, probably more so than the Euro nymphing stuff. So yeah, to me, it's down to fashion, it's down to social media, and I think to some degree as well, certain tackle companies pushing it as well, more so, and making it sound like you won't catch any fish if you don't do this, which we all know is not the case.
Yeah, we did okay before those sorts of things, I guess, as well, didn't we? So yeah, that's proof in itself. I was thinking when I was doing my research for this podcast that I think the last I saw you would probably have been the British Fly Fair, and this is being recorded in February, which is when it takes place, and it's kind of a shame for obvious reasons this couldn't take place this year, and it would be really great that happens next year. I'm sure everything's in place. It's a really cool event, isn't it, for everyone to meet up just before the season starts and just chat about life, chat about fishing too, isn't it?
It's I've been on a good few occasions, not just to the Fly Fair, other similar things before the Fly Fair, and you step foot in the door sometimes before you even just walking from the car park, and you bump into a friend, someone you've not seen for ages, so then you talk. And I can leave there barely having looked at an item of tackle or fly tying materials, and it's just literally one person and the next person just stop, just talking all day long, and it's fantastic. It's kind of frustrating. You need 2 days really. You need a day to reacquaint yourself with all the people you've not seen for years, and then you need a day to just ignore them. Or you could do with putting a mask on so that nobody recognises it. Right, I'm just going to check out the tackle and the fly tying stuff today. So yeah, really good way of catching up and talking to people that you've not seen for a while.
And do you think we might, and we'd had obviously shows, Toby's show in Bristol, the London one, this one and other ones, do you think we might see more of those appear as we get out and able to be more sociable?
Yeah, it's a good question. The answer is I don't know, because the country type shows seem to have really declined over them. I don't think the tackle companies wanted to put money into things like that. It was with online things that was seemed to be the way forward. It was cheaper. But then there was a sort of a resurgence in these probably more winter type shows. I think the London show maybe only happened once, something like that, and obviously the Fly Fair. But there just seemed to be a little bit of a resurgence there in that sort of thing. And they're great. I mean, I'm not really a fan of them myself, but these like casting demonstrations, things like that, they're great. I mean, I used to love them when I was not quite so experienced, and you'd go there and you'd see people casting, then you could talk to them and ask them all the questions about the casting and things that they were doing. So I think they're important, and I think they're a great part of fly fishing. I suppose like many sports have similar sort of things. But yeah, I just think that they're a great part of it. Like I said, not just from bumping into people, but just for, it's like fly tying materials. Yeah, you can all buy them online, but sometimes you just need to see them in the flesh and touch them and just get a feel for them. Same for rods, same for many things really. So it would be a shame if we lost that from fishing. I do think we need to actually get there, get hands on, see people, even people tying flies, just sat there watching them. And the technology we've got now, where they can be sat there with a big screen up at the back, showing in detail what they're doing. Yeah, to some extent you've got that with YouTube, but it's just not the same as being stood there in the flesh, watching someone tying a fly, casting a rod. Or just giving a talk, really. It's fantastic. So yeah, I think big part of the future of fly fishing, hopefully.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when we are able to go out how we'll be with seeing people again, won't it? That, I love hugging people when I see them, and whether we're all awfully polite and shake hands and then put some antiseptic on our hands, or however that's going to be. It's going to be fascinating to see how we come out of this, isn't it?
It is. We were watching, me and my partner were watching something last night, and a new series on Netflix, and they were all in a pub as normal. And I sort of passed the comment, that's going out, is that? That's what people used to do. And she goes, yes, it's going to be really strange when people start going out again. It's just, I think you're going to hesitate when you get to the door of the pub, and I think we'll quickly get back into it, but it is going to certainly seem strange at first. It's like now you watch a film on TV, and it's, well, they're less than 2 meters, and it was probably filmed 10 years ago, and you're applying the social distancing to everything that you see now. So it's going to take a while to get out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned about the casting demonstrations and how you, when you weren't as experienced, really enjoyed seeing those. And that leads me really nicely into our next segue and where your fly fishing career started. And, you know, I'm talking to you in Yorkshire and I'm based down in Devon. Although we may appear at other ends of the country, I guess part of your fly fishing heart and the start for you was down in here in Devon, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think when you start something new, whatever it would be, I think it's a lot of it's on decisions and maybe fate. I don't know, some of the decisions that you make. So when I took that decision right, I'm going to start fly fishing, I think I knew I wanted to go on a course and do it quite intensively. And I think getting magazines, looking at the, obviously long before the internet came along, buying fishing magazines, looking at the adverts in the back. And it was a toss-up between a few people, really. And I don't know what the deciding factor was, but I decided to come down to Devon and to spend a week with Simon Gawesworth. And when I look back now, I mean, that was like massive, because I could have gone with other people and not be sat here today. So that was massive. And I think as well, I'm sort of going off at a tangent here, but leading on from that, then it's a case of reading the right books, reading the right magazines, and meeting the right people. And if you don't do that, then you could just have a completely different ground and just never be anywhere near as good, or just your interest could be just completely different. A bird watching friend of mine once said it's all about that, really, meeting the right people and reading the right books, and I think that's so true. And like I said, that the foundation for me was going down there with Simon Gawesworth, a fantastic instructor, so knowledgeable, and his style really is more. I could never. I'm a different person. I could never have that style that he did. But yeah, fantastic and very, very important in my career, for want of a better term.
And they had Simon and his dad Buck had an amazing business that his father set up, and I don't know. I'd love to know some more about this as well. In that, like you say, it would be a course. You'd go and stay there. And I know when his dad was running it, and I guess Simon latterly as well, that they had all the accommodation, they had somebody to cook the meals, you did the tuition, you may have bought or may not have bought some tackle as well. It was a perfect, as somebody like yourself who's worked in the industry, to me, that's almost the perfect model, isn't it, to get the most out of the experience that you possibly can.
Yeah, I think one of the keys to Simon, like I say, it was the complete course. You were travelling down there, you were staying there, obviously doing the tuition throughout the day. He even did things in the evening. I mean, I never did that. It was 5 o'clock goodbye, and I went home. But then he'd sometimes come into the pub. We did some sort of basic fly tying in the hotel some evenings and that, so it was a complete thing. But I think the key probably for Simon was where he was in North Devon, in the middle of nowhere really, I suppose, in Great Torrington he was based. And if you were going, there were so few people live within a short distance there. If you were having a day, well, you couldn't really have a day, you were literally staying there. So I think he focused on his 3 and 5 day courses. And it worked perfectly. And the pubs that he used were great little country pubs. The rivers were good. It was like a little team. By the end of the week, you'd made some good friends. And yeah, at the end of the week, you ended up buying a rod and reel and a full setup of him. So yeah, he had a great little business going there. Actually, when I got the letter saying he was leaving, he was going over to the States, I was gutted. I'd had 2 courses down there at that point. In fact, 3. I had 2 courses and actually went down there as a friend and just stayed down there with him. So when he said he was going to the States, I was gutted.
Yeah, he's a fine man, and I think probably one of the nicest people in fly fishing as well. Can you, just to humour me, can you remember some of the rivers that you fished down there? I guess the Torridge, obviously, but anywhere else you fished?
Yeah, struggling a little bit. The Torridge and the Tor, and I think the only other one I can remember was a little river called, I think it was the Mole, and they are the only rivers I can actually recall fishing.
Not the Bray, you didn't get on the Bray?
I know the name, and I wouldn't like to say yes or no. I don't think so, but I wouldn't like to say for definite.
Yeah, I just wondered because it's a wonderful, wonderful little stream, and I know you've probably got his spey casting books, and there's pictures of it there, and it's just a pretty little stream, good, honest trout stream, which is absolutely stunning. But it was interesting what you were saying about the tuition aspect of it, and as somebody, well, when I first started working for Nick Hart, he worked for Simon, and the way he taught was very much, having seen Simon demonstrate, very similar, which went on to how I used to teach people. I'm sure you're probably similar. And I loved his jargon-free, rich with analogies that made it so easy to understand.
Yeah, it was just so laid back. A completely different person to me. I'm sort of quite shy and quiet. And he was very outgoing. And he could criticise you. He could basically take the piss out of you, and I could never do that. I could not take the piss out of one of my students because it just wouldn't come out right. It would be like I literally was taking the piss, whereas Simon was taking the piss and teaching you. So yeah, like I say, just so good at making you understand things. Like I said, just presenting it in such an easy way, really. But I think it also comes down to that thing that I'm sure you've learnt the same when you were going through your sort of learning to become an instructor, this substance and style thing. And so you pick up the substance of him, but the style, as I said, I couldn't have Simon's style because it just wouldn't work for me because I'm a completely different personality. But yeah, the substance is there.
Yeah, and like I say, I love the way he explains stuff. And I had Jason Borger on here, and he's very similar. His casting books make perfect sense. And sometimes I look at stuff and I'm thinking, wow, I can't understand some of what the scientifics of, and it is, get the rod and line to work together and you're in a relatively good place. And if you can get the person to understand why it's working well together and when it doesn't, then that's a pretty good place to be, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That book of Borger's, the Modular Approach, a nightmare to read if you're going to go cover to cover. It's not that type of book. But if you're looking for, as an instructor in particular, the way it does break it down to tiny little modules, the smallest part of each cast, and I actually used a lot of that for my teaching, just to sort of break it down into, this is a back cast module, a pause module, and a forward cast module. There you've got your basic cast, and the way then it stacked things on top of each other. And so if two things happened at the same time, they got stacked on top of each other. If one thing happened after another, it went after it, and that's how somebody could have the foresight to see that, because I would never. I could have taught casting all my life, but I would never have seen it in that modular way that he did in that book, and it was a fantastic book. So yeah, I think I don't consider myself to have been a great casting instructor. I was good at teaching people to fish rivers in particular, but actually casting, I wouldn't say that was particular. I could never have been a Simon Gozer for Jason Borger, Lefty Cray, these type of people. And I think all you can do when you're like me is really sort of watch what they do and listen to how they and just try and emulate that as best you can. But you're never going to. I was never going to be that good at teaching people to cast. Simple as that.
So you're down in Devon and you're on these courses. Did you think that guiding gene, the more you visited, I think you said you were down 3 times, do you think that guiding stroke casting instructor gene was brought to life, and it sort of may have been dormant, it may not have been, and was quietly building momentum in the background? Was there a stage where you were thinking, wow, I'd really like to do this?
In a word, no. Even while I was going through the training to become a guide or instructor, probably would be a better term in those days. So I'd kind of reached a level where everything seemed to come together at once. Actually, it was a bit of a coming together of many different things. From buying a computer, daft as it sounds, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I bought this computer, didn't even know how to turn it on, and I'm not exaggerating, I literally did not know how to turn the thing on. So I enrolled on many college courses, and one of those happened to be web design. So that was kind of one of the elements to it. This is all round about the turn of the century, actually. So I was going out, I was catching fish, knew I could fish a little bit, so I enrolled for the eliminator to get into the England team. So I did that, and at first attempt I got through to the national final, and first attempt of 2003 that was. So first attempt I actually qualified, got in the top 5, so got in the England team for 2004. While that was going on, nothing to do with it whatsoever, but it was probably down to that thing of, I know I can fish a bit, where do I go from here? Oh, well, I'll learn to be a casting instructor. With no intention whatsoever of ever teaching anybody to cast, it was just, like I say, I suppose you might refer to it nowadays as continuous professional development. I'd kind of reached a plateau. How do I further that? So went to become an instructor, and at the time, been in the fire service at that time, probably 10 years or so, and I used to do a little bit of painting and decorating on the side then. And I remember saying to the guy that I was working with, so I might have to have an odd day off becoming a casting instructor. But it literally was, I was just expecting an hour here and an hour there teaching people to cast. And then the things all came together at that point then, like the England cap, put myself a website together, got qualified, launched the website, and within a week the phone started ringing and the emails started coming, and it never stopped for 15 years. And that's it really. But there's no, to answer your question, no, I never wanted to be a guide as such or instructor. It just happened accidentally, really.
A lovely story. I don't know if you're the same. I suspect you probably are. Do you get lots of people contacting you saying, I'm really good at catching fish, I should be a guide? And do you advise people about it? And, because one of the things I was thinking about is turning a passion or a hobby kind of into a semi-business. It's an interesting road to travel down, isn't it? And it's not quite always as flat as you might imagine. There's quite a few bumps and ruts and wrong turns and everything else that you can make. What advice do you give to people if they are thinking about going down that route of being a guide stroke instructor?
It's to a point, it's sport my fishing, really. I always thought, this will be fantastic, I'll take someone fishing for the day, and 5 o'clock I'll pack them off in the car and I'll leg it back down to the river. And in 15 years of guiding, I don't think I did that once. And by the end of the day, I was that tired, that exhausted. It was just home, and that was it. And that was the other side of it. I knew I had to get home because I knew there'd be a stack of emails to answer when I got home, and then everything to get ready for the following day. And if you think you get then a day off and you've been stood in the river with clients all week, the last thing I wanted to do was go and stand in the river and cast again a lot of the time. So it did ruin my fishing, certainly locally, to the point where it just dulled my passion for it, really. I was passionate about guiding, I was passionate about people catching fish and learning the right way. But my own fishing just dwindled, I suppose, really. I don't regret being a guide, probably from a money point of view as much as anything else. Been knocking 27 years, I think, in the fire service. Now we don't get paid a massive wage, and I've managed to fish all over the world. I've sort of fished in the Bahamas, I've fished in Mexico, Cuba, Poland, Slovenia, Spain, as you mentioned, lots and lots of places there. and I probably wouldn't have fished in any one of those places. On top of that, fished at home, trips up to the Shetlands, trips to the Outer Hebrides fishing. That's not cheap either, daft as that might sound. And I honestly think on a firefighter's wage, with young families, etc., probably change I'm getting now into my 50s, that's changing a little bit now. But I couldn't have fished in any of those places without the extra income from teaching people to fish. So no, don't regret doing it. But I think if you go in, if you're a keen fisherwoman, and you enjoy your fishing, I think you really need to consider, is it actually something that you want to do? Because I think it's bound to spoil your fishing to some degree if you're busy, you're teaching people non-stop. I can't imagine anybody sort of looking forward then to going fishing if they've been 3 days there in that week already teaching it. So that's something. And then I think, for me, I think if you're going to be good at it, I think you need the experience first. I think there's far too many instructors and guides now just think, right, that's it, I want to be a guide, and out they go. And yeah, they can get the qualifications and things to do it, even though you don't need them. They can go out and get that. But I still think if you've not got the experience, you're not going to be a good guide. Simple as that.
Yeah, it's an interesting road to go down with that. And I think it is, I've done a similar amount of years as you, and you learn a lot, don't you? But it's like you say, it's knowing your subject, and be it entomology, and I'd say, what do you know about bugs? What do you know about this? What do you know about casting? What do you know about, and I'm sure you were similar that, people would phone up and book and say, well, what hatches? And I'd say, well, at 2:30 caddis are coming off. You'd know those things intimately. You're not winging it. And that to me, and I've always been, I'm sure you're probably similar, super protective of the industry, because to me, it always felt that people were paying hard-earned cash to spend a day with people like yourself, myself, and lots of other good guides out there that have put the hours in. They know their subject intimately, and if somebody asked you a question on the river, you could answer it. You wouldn't need to bluff it. You wouldn't need to lie. You could actually answer that or work out what was happening, what the fish were rising to, all those sorts of things that go along with it. And that's reputational risk is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and you'll have been the same with me. You'll have heard feedback about other instructors that were not particularly good, people doing it without qualifications, etc. And I think Simon Gauze never had a qualification, did he? And yet he was a fantastic instructor. Stuart Crofts, many times capped by England. I don't think, as far as I know, Stuart never got qualified. Fantastic for all the feedback you get from that. So having an actual, and let's face it was a casting qualification, not a fishing qualification, it was a casting qualification. So if you know your subject, as those two examples clearly did, then you don't need to be qualified. But if you are literally just setting up to be an instructor, then you've got to put some work in there. You wouldn't have someone teaching your kids at school that was just not qualified, didn't know the stuff. So it's no different. If you're charging someone good money to come along and give them a lesson, you need to know your subject. Now, whether that's gained from fishing at a high level, or whether that is gained from studying casting and getting right into that, same thing. So you don't actually need the qualification, but you need to know that you're good enough at something to be able to teach it. So yeah, you'd hear these reports of people just setting up, and it brings the instruction business into disrepute really when there is people like that. Because if you go on the website, you've no way of knowing other than what that person says about themselves. You've no way of knowing how good they are, how bad they are. So yeah, protective. One thing I never understood from that, though, is people who are protective over their area. So I worked obviously in the Yorkshire Dales, and I'd get people coming from miles around bringing people in there. And I know a lot of people wouldn't have liked that. I couldn't care less. Well, I had my business. That was it. People want to come to me. That's fine. Say to them. I'd bump into guides on the river that were maybe up there for a week from the south or something. Didn't bother me, and I never really understood that. This is like my patch. I never really got that, to be fair, when I was fishing.
That's really interesting. I tried to set up down here a guides association to try and make sure they didn't all flip each other the bird when they saw each other, and that ended in tears. And I tried really hard. I thought, wouldn't it be nice if people all helped each other and stuff? And then it just all fell apart within minutes, which was a real shame. And that's how it is. I suppose these things are microcosms of businesses anyway, and how they sort of play out. But it's interesting to see that. And it's, again, I was thinking about what you were saying about guiding, because I think we're becoming slightly more of a guiding culture as well. It seems as though there's more of that going on. And, there are some great young guides coming through, and I always try and talk to people, even if I don't know them. Sometimes they'll speak to me, or I might message and wish them good luck and all that sort of stuff that goes with it. But yeah, there are some really young, passionate, enthusiastic guides out there who have earned their stripes as well, which is kind of interesting. Do you sense there is a little bit more, in our day when we started, it was more really teach someone to fish a little bit and then go from there, and that was the basis of it. But there would be people who'd say, right, I want to learn how to fish the ewer or whatever, and would hire you. But I get the sense there is a little bit more now of people saying, okay, I want to hire a guide because I'm fishing here. Do you feel that?
Yeah, I think it's life in general now. I think people are more prepared to pay for any sort of instruction. I remember a few years ago I went on a bread making course down in Bath, and that was fantastic. And I had the guy's book, and I had his DVD and things about making bread, but it was still fantastic to go down there and have that sort of hands-on experience with him. So I think that's just life in general now. I think modern teaching has kind of, we've all been sort of brought up that way now, modern teaching, and I just think it's the way to do it. Yeah, people definitely can. Some people might just come for 2 hours just to learn to fish a specific way, so it's nymphing in particular, or whether that would be casting. It's an interesting point about people learning to fish a particular river, and I would get those sort of inquiries, but I used to say to them, it was one of the big things for me, was explaining that if you can fish a river, and the wharf for me was fantastic, because the wharf is if you could make a river to teach people to fish, you'd make it just like the River Wharf, from Bolton Abbey upstream, really, absolutely perfect river. You could do any technique you wanted to do there. You could do it even in low water. It's such a fast-flowing river. Even in low water, you could still teach nymphing techniques and things there. So yeah, people would come along. You could take them there. You could teach them specific techniques, and yeah, I just think it just worked well.
So you were a guide for 15 years. What made you call it a day?
I think two things really. One, I'd simply had enough. I started to lose the passion, and I wanted to go out with my reputation intact. And I got to the point where I properly hated it in the end. I just didn't want to be there, and I didn't want to be taken. I think it was a bit of lack of patience. If someone came along and they could apply themselves, I could still, even now, I could probably still enjoy taking them out. It was when people weren't perhaps so good that I wasn't perhaps so good, and that's not really what you should be doing if you're an instructor. So I just had enough. I'd lost a lot of the passion, and I'd got fed up of being busy. I just felt for 15 years life had been, I don't know about turmoil is the right word, but just rushing from one thing to the next, whether it was like rushing to do a shift at the fire station, coming out there because I was meeting someone, panicking in case we got a job at the end of the shift, so I might then possibly be late to meet the client, etc. So that was one side. I just got fed up of doing it and being busy. And the other thing that really drove it is the very final sort of nail in the coffin was I took another job in the fire service, and I actually work away from home now. So I work away from home for 4 days, and I come home for 4 days, and then back again like that. So I thought, well, in fact, when I started this job, it was 3 days away, 3 days home. And I thought, there's no way I'm coming home but just for 3 days, and I'm going back out working on those 3 days. Plus, it came up with a decent pay rise, so I thought, well, I just don't need it anymore. So that was it. Just called it a day. So, yeah, virtually overnight, just wrap things up. So that was it. Taking a new job was the driver, I suppose, but I'd had enough. It had reached a natural end, really.
Thanks so much for your honesty in answering that as well. And I went through a stage 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, where it was almost a little bit of burnout. And I said to Emma, I think I've probably had enough now, but I found it really hard to let go. Yet, when I finally did, the business went to somebody I really wanted it to, which I was thrilled about, and I haven't thought about it again since. Did you have any regrets, or you said, right, that's done, and you walked away, and you don't think, oh, I wish I was doing that, or whatever it may be?
No regrets whatsoever. Possibly the only regret, maybe not stopping 1 or 2 years sooner. But no, I kind of have a phobia of it now. If people mention about sort of giving them a lesson or some instruction, it's like, whoa, and proper, almost like I said, verging on a phobia of teaching people to fish nowadays. It's just, I've been there, I've done it, I've moved on, and no matter how much money you threw at me now, I wouldn't do it. Been there and done it, moved on. So no regrets whatsoever.
Yeah. I was talking, funnily enough, yesterday, the Wild Trout Trust auction, was it last year or the year before, was my last ever guided day. And I was talking to the guy who won that, because obviously lockdown, we've just rolled it over. And that will be my last day. And I know him, I've guided him for years, so I'm really looking forward to it, and that'll be fun. But yeah, it's funny, it's never, I'm quite similar in that I don't look and think about casting in the same way as I did. I still enjoy it, but I don't feel the same way as I did. And I, like yourself, get people asking me, will you take me out just one day? And I say, the way to get out of it, and like you, I don't get a cold shiver, but it's not far off. But I'll say, well, the problem is, if I say yes to you, then I'll say yes to other people, and then I end up being a guide. And I'm very wary of going down that route again, and I don't want to. So it's been kind of fun to step right the way back and not think about it in that way, which is nice. Tell me, did you, the moment you packed up, I think I know the answer to this, but when you packed up, did you fall back in love with fishing in a different, more deeper way?
I think that had already started, to be fair. I think I started to fish in a slightly different way, different rivers. So it was probably one of the, again, the driving factors in wanting to stop guiding, that I was starting to enjoy my own fishing a lot more. So it wasn't an overnight thing where, right, that's it, I can now move on and fish. That had started, and yeah, so your last question, I said there was 2 reasons for packing in. 1, I'd had enough, and 2, for taking this job. But probably that would be a 3rd reason, that I had actually started to enjoy fishing again myself, discovering new rivers and things like that. And that would also be a factor. So no, not at all. Yes, but I'd already started down that path.
And did you find, as an angler, when you were guiding, would you find that you're spending more time fishing with people because you were used to it? And then did you subsequently spend more time fishing on your own, more alone time with just you and the fish and the river?
No, I think you over the years, you'll have done the same as a guide. You get you meet lots of people, and they become really good and close friends, and that's the same for me. In fact, I have few friends who are not fishermen really nowadays. That they're really all fishing friends. So yeah, it would be a case. I have to keep a diary in those days because I was so busy. So. And if a friend wanted to, sounds awful this, but if a friend wanted a day fishing, they almost have to go in the diary like a client. So I suppose, at one point I'd get very few fishing days alone, whereas now it's probably 50-50. 50% of the time I'll be on my own, which I enjoy. I always enjoy being on my own and doing my own thing. But then 50% of the time fishing with friends, which I enjoy equally. It's good to spend the day with your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still going through that spell of thinking, right, actually, I can go fishing on my own. I don't have to fit it around. And although I enjoy that company of friends on the river greatly, I kind of cherish those moments alone, which I never tended to get much time on the river on my own. So that's become my sort of, it's the wrong word, but selfish, in that I can just fish for myself and go on my own and enjoy that aspect of it. So I think that's been a thing that I've noticed, hence me asking you that question. But I wanted to move on a tiny bit now and say, during lockdown that we've had, and we've had lots of chance to think about things and how we're going to approach our fishing, and one of the themes I tend to be hearing back a lot is that it's more than just the fishing. Like you say, it's the friendships, it's everything that goes with it. Do you think that fishing's taking a little change in direction, probably led by the explosion of social media, where it was about the fish and everything else? Do you think we're starting to reassess and look at things slightly differently, or how does it feel to you?
Good question, really. No, I've probably not noticed much. For myself, it's and I suppose for most people, it's more than just the fishing. Like I said, the scenery is a big thing for me. I enjoy walking. I enjoy fell walking and things. So scenery is one of the big draws for me. Wildlife is definitely up there. Just, like I say, that feeling of being alone at times, or meeting friends at other times. I don't know. It's funny when it's social media. At times I hate it, but I take part in it as well. Certain aspects of social media just not nice. But yeah, it's good to see what other people are doing. I'm hoping one of the things to come out of social media is you see a lot of bad fish handling, and I'm hoping that one of the things that will happen is that people will start to respect the fish a little bit more, because clearly at the moment a fish is just an object for some people to get some likes on social media. With no thought for the fish at all. One of the problems is if you happen to criticise someone on social media, it's always, even if you try and do it constructively, it's always taken the wrong way. And I don't know what that is about social media. Then you get all their friends will pile in. I've seen, it's not so much with me, but I've seen with certain friends have just tried in a polite and constructive way to put people right about fish handling in particular. And so not only they have a go, but all the friends back them up and pile in. And you can see it was clearly a bad photograph. It was clearly bad fish handling. So instead of holding their hand up and saying, yeah, you're right, I shouldn't have done that and whatever, even making an excuse. Just that side of things is not nice to see. And there's a few things like that are not good. But hopefully good things can come of social media. But yeah, I'm a little bit sort of in between the two. That sometimes I like social media. Sometimes I can't stand it. I've often thought about coming off it completely, but I think that's the wrong thing to do. Not a fan of Facebook, I'll be honest. I pretty much hate Facebook, even though I have an account and rarely put anything on there. Quite a big fan of Twitter and of Instagram. Twitter in particular, I can find it frustrating at times, but yeah, I do enjoy Twitter. But no, I don't know. I don't really know what the answer is to your question there. I can only really answer it personally and the way I feel about it, but not really. I'm not seeing a trend would be my answer, really.
Yeah. It's interesting what you say about the fish handling stuff, and I guess lots of us aren't fishing now. But again, to me, it's felt as though that people are starting to think about that a little bit more, rather than the likes, and be it holding the fin of the grayling up, or trout held way out. And we've tried to do our own little bit in our magazine that we don't have grip and grins, and most of the fish are photographed, if not all of them, in the water or very, very close to it. And we've tried to do that. And I think what you say about constructively trying to say something can be taken the wrong way, wrongly so in some respects, because if you're not handling the fish properly, then that's wrong. But I get the sense that that is starting to improve, and I hope that does continue to improve, and long may that continue. And by education with people like yourself and other people putting images, people think, actually, that's kind of cool. That's a nice way to photograph a trout or a grayling or whatever it may be. And I'm not sort of yanking it in front of there and worrying about, like you say, how many likes it's going to get. And I think that's my hope out of this. I guess that's where I was going with that to a degree, that my hope is that it becomes less about the amount of likes you get for a photo of a fish, as many as there's a beautiful river, there's a dipper, there's a kingfisher, whatever, the whole aspect of it. That's where I'm hoping. I'm an old romantic about things like that, and I hope it does happen, but we'll have to wait and see. But let's move on. And this is an interesting one for me, that you've had a long association with Hardy, and I guess you've seen over the years so many changes, and you know, what changes have you seen over that period?
Do you mean changes within Hardy, or do you mean changes with of tackle?
In the tackle, really, Stuart.
Yeah, I suppose the most obvious one would be this movement towards Euro nymphing, rather than just what you might call a standard casting fishing rod, to like a Euro nymphing type thing, really. We're lucky, aren't we? Now we've got the tackle is so good, from lines, reels, rods. Whereas at one time you could have bought a really cheap, nasty poor rod. Nowadays it's nearly impossible to buy a poor rod, even if you don't spend a great deal of money. But yeah, the change, like I say, we're just so lucky. We've got like reels. Reels nowadays are fantastic. Rods, the materials. I often wonder, I'm sure you think this yourself, where's the next advancement going to be? And I'm sure we've had this a few times. So something comes along. So now we've got the Hardy, we've got the Sintrix, other manufacturers are there where like there's this resin impregnated carbon which makes them stronger, therefore you need less material, therefore they're lighter. That's the last sort of big advancement. So where the next one's coming from, God only knows. But yeah, it just keep moving forward. I don't know whether that'll be driven again by techniques. Obviously, the rods were driven by these techniques. Some of these Euro nymphing techniques came along, so the rods have to change to suit that. But yeah, that would be, I would think, the main difference or the main change in tackle is that longer and lighter, I suppose, in a nutshell.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I remember, I'm sure you can cast your mind back when I worked for Nick, that those first Streamflex rods turned up, and I think there was a 9-foot 4-weight and a 10-foot 4-weight possibly, and you know, that was completely alien almost in some respects. As river anglers, you know, you were fishing 7-foot rods, 7.5, 8.5-foot rods, and we had these new longer rods coming out, driven by obviously Howard Croston's design. But it was amazing seeing those come onto the marketplace for the first time. Do you remember those? Yes,
Streamflex. I think just a complete game changer. They were just, I think I'm probably wrong on this, but certainly as far as I'm concerned, they were the first kind of river-specific rod. In the past, you'd have a range of rods, and half of that range would be for rivers, the other half would be for still waters, possibly even up into salmon and the sea trout and things like that. The Streamflex, as far as I'm concerned, were the first specific river rod, and I think just really drove river fishing in those days. Absolutely fantastic value for money for a start. Covered all disciplines from short up to long, light lines to what you would heavy for rivers anyway. So yeah, complete game changer that. I think just going back to that last answer I gave you, I think it was probably a two-stage thing. I think rods got longer and lighter for competition fishing. That was the way it was going. People see this thing of, obviously competition fishing tend to catch lots of smaller fish, and if you had a stiffer, heavier rod, you were bouncing fish off. So I think they went down that longer, lighter thing first of all from competition fishing. So yeah, you more supple, more forgiving, and also the longer gave you a little bit more control. That was the first stage, and then leading on from that, and that's when the Euro nymphing kind of came from that. So they've got probably longer and lighter still. So it was a two-stage change for that. And yeah, like I said, the Streamflex it's probably been copied a few times since, but it's still there, and it's just a fantastic range of rods. And like I said, the value for money. Well, I still have some Streamflex rods in my collection. Value for money, awesome.
Yeah, I remember when the Czech nymph thing was starting to get going, and that must have timed with those Streamflex rods coming. And I remember reading a piece, I still remember it, and I think it was Simon Robinson wrote about Czech nymphing. It was either him or Howard, so apologies if I've got one of those wrong. And they were obviously starting to think about the longer rods. And you can see the process starting to begin then, because they wanted a longer rod to reach further away from where they were Czech nymphing. Yet you couldn't have a light one. So I remember him saying, they were fishing with a 10-foot 7-weight and nymphing with that, and how that development quickly happened and how things relatively quickly came about, didn't they?
Yeah, it was a fairly quick gem. I used to check nymph with a 8.5-foot 5-weight, and it worked. I think anything would work, as you're saying, a 10-foot 7-weight, it worked. But obviously, there's better tools for the job. I also remember having, I don't know if you remember this rod. It was a Grays rod, but long before my association with Hardy and Grays. Grays brought out an actual Czech nympha, the Oliver Edwards Czech nympha. If you remember that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good rod. It was heavy, but put a heavy reel on there and you didn't notice it. That was a fantastic rod. I don't know where that ended up. I don't have it now, so don't know. I probably sold it at some point, but don't remember. That was a superb rod. Was that for that technique? Nothing else, but that. And I suppose again that's another advancement in tackle, isn't it? Whereas at one time you had to have one rod for one thing. Now we can use rods for various disciplines.
But that's interesting, because that brings us around. I know, again, off mic, we were talking about that. And do you think we'll start to see more of a crossover? And, we were talking about the new Hardy ultralight LLs. And I think there's two rods in the range. It's either a 9-footer and a 9'6" or whatever, that Howard says that you can Euro nymph with, but you can also string up with a fly line. Do you think that's something that may be the next sort of direction that we're starting to see get going?
No, I have to disagree with you on that, because I think it's something that's been with us a while now. I think, again, back to the Streamflex Plus, the 9'6" dry fly rod, stick a little 6-inch extension piece in there, and you've got a 10-foot sort of Euro nymphing rod. Or whatever. So that's a good few years ago. Is that now? Isn't it? That Streamflex Plus. I've had a few rods over the years. I had one of the best rods I ever had from Hardy. Unfortunately, I sold it, but I wish I hadn't now. A 10-foot 3-weight Hardy glass. No, not glass. Sorry, Hardy jet. And that you could put a 3-weight line on there, and you could cast like nearly a full line with that. And equally, you could put a French leader on there and fish that. I've got one of the current rods out of the Hardy range that I have the 10-foot 4-weight Demon. Fish up all day long with the fly line, but you can easily put a French leader or Euro nymphing line on there and fish that. So, no, I think I'd disagree with that. I think it's been something that's been with us for a while now. Whether rods will have to go that way in future, whether they'll have to be careful of doing a few things, otherwise people won't buy them, I don't know. But it's certainly not something new.
Mm. Oh, that's interesting. I know I have a rod that Luke Bannister built me, which is a 9.5-foot 4-weight, which I can do both with as well. And I've sort of looked. I personally haven't found one I felt would do the job well, but I didn't know the Streamflex Plus and the others, so that may be why I've still sort of been searching. And there's been vague sort of crossovers of rods that I've almost been able to get there. It just felt to me as though that may be the next thing that may be pushed a little bit more from a consumer standpoint, but we'll have to wait and see. But I wanted to go back almost to the beginning, really, where I said, the last time we sort of kind of hooked up, I think I saw you subsequently actually in remembering it, but talking about Spain, and you've talked about that you travelled extensively for fishing. Spain's pretty cool though, isn't it? I think you ended up in Leon, if I remember the article correctly.
Yes, we had a week in the, I think it's the city of Leon. It's probably the best trip I've been on, believe it or not. I've had some fantastic fishing trips over the years, but the fishing wasn't particularly great. It wasn't bad fishing, but it wasn't certainly not great fishing. Probably get better fishing at home, but it was just that little bit of an adventure. You're there in a fantastic little city, really, really nice city in northern Spain. We stayed in a fantastic small hotel with a bar downstairs, so that it was just a pattern. So we'd get up in the morning, we'd leave the place, we'd go and get a coffee and some sort of breakfast from somewhere. Then we'd go somewhere else in the little centre there and buy some like a packed lunch for the day. Then we'd jump in the hire car and we'd just drive up one of the valleys and find some fishing. We'd fish for the day. Like I said, just no real desire to catch tons of fish, just really, really interesting fishing in the countryside of Spain. And then late afternoon, we'd jump back in the car, we'd come back on the way back to the hotel, then we'd probably stop for a few beers in a little bar or something, maybe a little bite to eat, back to our hotel, spend an hour or two on our own getting ready, and then to be out for the night round, going around the town, wine nights, beer nights, tapas, etc. And then obviously repeat that the next day, and it was just a full package really. It was like a holiday with some with a friend with some fishing thrown in. Fantastic.
Yeah, well, it set the fire in me when I read that piece, and we ended up going not to Leon, although I've got a friend who lives there, funnily enough, somebody I used to guide, and we ended up on the way to Andorra, so right out in Catalonia, and we fished some streams around there, and we'd have exactly the same as you said, that real nice routine of breakfast, local eggs and whatever the local Spanish sausage was for breakfast, and rabbit for dinner and stuff like that. It was a hotel we stayed in. But one of the things for us was that we went for trout, and then we saw a barbel in the rivers. And I don't know if you experienced those, but that was phenomenal targeting those. Did you get a chance at any of those where you were?
No, we didn't. No, it was just 100% trout as far as I can remember. Yeah, just trout.
Yeah, they were just a game changer for us. We couldn't believe it, and stalking them, and we were euro nymphing for them. That seemed to be the best way to fish for them. Hardly surprisingly, although they do rise. So that's a trip that I'm hoping to enjoy another time sometime soon when we're allowed to. We've done a fly culture trip actually, and there's a group of us going down to Italy with Vito, who's a guest on here, and that sounds fantastic fun as well. And I know you know Slovenia pretty well, and it's a similar sort of thing, crystal clear rivers, marble trout, brown trout, brook trout. It just sounds like heaven. I'm super excited. There may be a chance it happens this year. It may be next. But do you have, Spain aside, a favourite destination in Europe, and then perhaps looking at a wider scale too?
Europe a bit hard pushed to give a favourite destination. I loved the trip to Spain. I said not so much from a fishing point of view, just the full package of that. If I went back there, there's a good chance I will go back to Spain. I think I'd want to go back with the same friend, not least because he spoke reasonable Spanish, so we coped a lot better with him there. But yeah, I think it's one of those things, if you've done something, if I went to someone else, it would kind of spoil it. So I think I'd only want to really go back with Paul that I went with at that time. I enjoyed my days in Slovenia, but a little bit like the guiding, when that came to an end, it had reached a natural conclusion. But yeah, stunning place, had some fantastic trips there with some fantastic people. I fished in Poland, which I enjoyed, but again, no real desire to return there. I honestly think, and this may surprise you, but I think if I had to sort of nail out fishing destinations, favourites, it would be in the UK. It would either be Cumbria, Aberdeenshire, Outer Hebrides or Shetland, and world-class fisheries, really.
Good answers. Good answers. Again, a guest we had on here, Stuart Yates in Assynt, and that just sounds, I'm trying to engineer something that we can spend some time there. It just sounds amazing, some of those places, and I'm hoping that I'll get there at some stage. Trouble is, there's so many rivers, there's so little time, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me and Matt Eastham had a trip to Assynt a few years ago. Great trip. A little bit disappointed with the fish. It's stunning scenery. Really, really good week. The fishing was a little bit disappointing. Now, whether we had a bad week, we caught plenty of fish, but they were small. I was fortunate. I think I had the best fish, something like £2.8, which is a good wild fish anywhere. But it was kind of a one-off, really. It was unseasonably cold that year. It was middle of June, and there was snow on the tops there, and just really not such good weather. Absolutely. In fact, I think it was our last full day there, we were tackling up to go and fish a mayfly lock, and I actually said to Matt, I said, if this was January or February, and we were tackling up to go grayling fishing, I'd still be saying it was cold. It was that bad. So whether that was why we didn't really catch so many good fish, I don't know. And I'd like to go back, but it's Matt and I had this conversation by messaging service the other day. We enjoyed it there, but the draw for the fishing, it's kind of spoilt me wanting to go because we caught so many sort of small fish and nothing bigger really. So that's kind of put me off going there. I don't know if you were coming to this or whether I missed it on my last answer, but you sound like best places to go in Europe and then worldwide. Over recent years, I've started to fish in Cuba, obviously bone fishing over there, and absolutely fantastic. Now, bone fishing's generally out of my price bracket. The only way I've been managing to bone fish over the last few years is to go on a package holiday where there's bone fishing close by, and Cuba's fit the bill perfectly, and I've had some unbelievable fishing in Cuba. The last trip there was October, 2019 it would have been. We'd booked to go with Thomas Cook and they collapsed the week before, so luckily one of the group managed to route us halfway around the world to still get there, and had a fantastic trip, and the fishing was just unbelievable. It was like spring trout fishing. You were like wading along, walking, just looking for that one solitary big fish, and I would say my average size of fish that week would have been between 5 and 6 pound, and my biggest was 8. Literally every fish was sort of 5, 6 pound, of the 8 pound. There's so few small fish, but it was just solitary fish that were just spinning, and then you'd just see them, cover them, and when they turned on your fly, I've never known anything like it, this massive surge and wave, and they'd grab your fly, and easy fishing really, to be fair, easy, as long as you cast reasonably well, get in position, easy fishing. So yeah, for me, Cuba, yeah, fantastic bone fishing, I loved it.
Lovely. Fantastic. They are an amazing fish, and again, I suppose we're going to see, hopefully, surges in interest in travelling throughout the UK, but also supporting some of these other places as well, and the opportunity to throw a fly at bonefish, tarpon, permit, I guess, as well. And yeah, it's been a while since I've hooked a bonefish, so that one's starting to itch a little bit now as well. But like we say, there's so many, isn't there, that we want to target. But we're going to start wrapping things up now. But how does fishing? I know we've covered lots, but how does fishing feel to you right now? Is it in a fly fishing as a whole, our little universe? How does it feel to you right now?
Yeah, good question. Looking on social media, it's not just social media as well, it's in the news. I think one of the biggest threats to fishing is going to be like climate change and sort of pollution, really. It's more than pollution, isn't it? It's habitat problems for not just for trout, I don't suppose, any fish, but the report only came out yesterday about freshwater fish throughout the world. So many species going extinct and things. So yeah, some some parts there's a bit doom and gloom for the fishing. As I say, to me, I've never heard this on the news or anywhere, but we've kind of got two issues when it comes to the environment. We've got this global warming thing, which is linked to obviously emissions and carbon, etc. But then we've got like the habitat stuff, and that seems to often get overlooked now. Everybody's talking about climate change, global warming, and so few people actually talk about environmental factors and habitat, and whether it's like building, farming problems, that sort of thing. And it needs to come into focus a little bit more. Certainly at home, anyway. That environmental aspect. It's not all about climate change. It's a two-pronged thing. Yeah, climate change is massive, but it's the habitat thing, farming practices, and opening up rivers, etc., etc. So, a big part of me feels a bit of sort of doom and gloom. I think, like I said, the social media aspect doesn't always do us a lot of favours. I think, again, back to climate change, so often our springs are not what we used to have, and so the fishing's not perhaps as good as it was. So lots and lots of pressures on fishing. And yet equally, whether it's because I'm starting to discover new stuff and sort of starting to relax a bit more now, I've packed in the guiding and things, but I also have a good feeling about fishing as well. So yeah, I think we're at a little bit of a crossroads really with our fishing. As I said, for various aspects, it's not all doom and gloom, but it's certainly far from all being rosy, and it's just a case of fingers crossed really for the future.
Yeah, it's interesting that we talked about social media and how that has allowed us to engage more people about, like you say, some of those practices. And, you know, I've tried my best on here to, in a small way, make people aware of pollution, what can be done, how to tackle these things. And my hope is this momentum, it looks as though other people are picking this up now and are trying to push. My hope is that it doesn't become a trendy thing that people follow that for a bit and then move on to the next, because like you say, these issues aren't going to go away, and if people are allowed to exploit our water sources, to pollute them, to not manage the land around them properly, then it's not going to get better. So my hope is that this noise gets louder about it and we do start to see action being taken on a bigger level there. So that's my hope with that anyway. But I wanted to, as I've mentioned again on these podcasts previously, that my fly time mojo has disappeared. So I've been buying some flies, and I bought some of your magnificent flies the other day, which I'm absolutely thrilled with. One of my favourite pastimes is getting the fly boxes ready for the season, and those little caddis were absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to put to those to use. How did this come about for you, the fly time business?
Yeah, it's not really a fly tying business as such, although I do have a few very expensive sort of bespoke flies on there. I don't enjoy tying flies, to be honest, so I don't want to sit here tying flies for people. So if someone wants them, they're going to have to pay for that, to be honest. So yeah, the flies that I sell directly off the website are not tied by me, they're tied by various people. How did it come about? It started from the early days of guiding, really. And if you think of it, in those days, I used to competition fish, so the flies I used to use myself and for teaching were like little Mary copperheads and things, for example. And in those days, competition flies weren't available. And I say competition flies, probably a bad term, but the flies that we were generally, tongues and beads, I suppose, are just coming out. So the flies that we were using for competitions, you would never see one. You'd be looking to it in a magazine, never mind in a catalogue available to buy. So I'd spend the day with someone on the river, and then at the end of the day, where can I get these flies? And, oh, well, you can't actually. So I actually contacted a local fly tyer. He started to tie them for me. So it was like a very low-key selling to people at the end of the day. Then it kind of developed into, well, if I'm selling them, I may as well put them on the website. And yeah, it's just kind of grown from there, really. Then when I decided to pack in the guiding, the fly side of things was a big part, about a third of the business actually. So I thought, well, it's quite an easy business to run. I thought, although I'm packing in the guiding, there's no need to pack in the flies. So I've kind of removed all the guiding and instruction pages off the website, left the information there for people to use if they want to come fish the rivers. So that's still there, but I just concentrated on selling the flies. And I think it's a year on year. I don't keep any figures or anything like that. I don't have the time, so there's no charts of how the business is developing. It's just a feeling I get that it just feels to be developing year on year and getting bigger and bigger. It could grow much faster at the time. It could grow much bigger, really. I could start to sell still water flies and lock flies, etc. But no, I'm quite happy doing what I do at the moment. Whether I retire from the fire service in under 18 months now, actually, and so I'll be a full-time fisher at that point, or fisher and cyclist and fell walker, etc. No intentions of taking up any other work at that time. I'll only be 55, so time to enjoy myself. So whether then I decide to sell the business, there's a good chance I will want to move it on. I don't know, but it's a good little business. It's not very intensive, so it sort of runs itself really, and provides a bit of pocket money. That's all really. Don't live on it, a bit of pocket money. But yes, that's how it came about. Just sort of by accident again, and it's just grown and grown and grown, and it's not massive by any stretch, but yeah, it's just a nice little business now really. My partner, without I work away of course, so she does 50% of the work now while I'm away, so it's easy to run, and yeah, quite a nice little business. It's interesting to see what flies people do order.
Yeah. Well, you probably saw mine. I think they were nearly all caddis and some small stuff. I think I just wanted to try. Where can people find that? What's the web address for that?
It's a long way. It's www.yorkshire-dales-flyfishing.com.
Perfect.
Yeah, they're all there, split into various sections. Strange. Only about just before the lockdown came along, or probably last winter, I added pike flies to it. I added saltwater flies to it. Pike flies have gone really well, particularly this last autumn, and obviously lockdown and not being able to travel and saltwater flies don't go hand in hand. And other than two that I sold to an acquaintance who was a friend who was going to the Canaries. I think I sold 2 flies to him. I don't think I sold a single saltwater fly all year, but that's the lockdown for you. But really, that's kind of how I've worked over years. It's a no-risk business because the flies that I have for saltwater, I just have a few in stock. They're the flies I use when I go saltwater fly fishing, so if nobody buys them, it's fine. I use them myself. Same for the pike flies, and it was the same. Probably not so much nowadays. When I was guiding, that was another reason why I had to sell them. I couldn't tie flies at that rate that I was going through them when I was guiding, so I had to buy them in for guiding with. And so again, in those days when I was guiding, there was no risk if I'd have stopped selling them overnight that I'd come in for the guiding. So.
And I guess with the saltwater, it was product development and product testing and all that sort of stuff as well, wasn't it? That's how you can justify it, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Although it cost me a camera because when I was in Cuba, I thought, right, I need some saltwater shots of some of these flies. 2 cameras with me, one sort of like good camera and one which I used for close-ups of flies. And unbeknown to me, the good camera was in my chest pack with the zip undone, and I bent over to take a picture of a fly, and it fell into the sea. So that was the end of a good camera.
Sorry to hear that. It's interesting though, when you were talking about the business and how it had grown over time, it made me think that there is, and we've been around the block a little bit now. There is something to be said for longevity, isn't there? And it's easy to burn bright for a very short time, but being able to last the course in an industry that's small, it's not easy, speaks volumes, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I suppose it's down to reputation as well. I think back to the early days, I used to advertise in magazines and things, and it just got in the end where it it was the opposite. I would get magazines ringing me, do you want to advertise? We're running a feature on this, advertise your business then. I said, look, I can't cope with the business I've got. The last thing I want to do is get even busier. And it was great because they used to just think, oh, right, that's fine, and put the phone down. There was no real sales pitch from it after that because there was no answer to that. I don't want to be any busier than I am, so they couldn't answer that. It's just, I don't know. I think it helps with Google and things if you've been around a long time, and I think Google picks up on that. So I think it gives you good ratings on Google. Word of mouth obviously comes from that as well. Obviously, repeat business. So all those factors kind of build in together, and your business hopefully keeps building and building.
Yeah, good. Well, it's been fabulous talking with you. I hope you enjoy your retirement when it comes. It's not long now. So I hope you enjoy being a trout and grayling bum and a bonefish bum and everything that goes with that. It's been lovely to catch up. I hope at some stage, and if you can drag Matt down, you'll be more than welcome to come have a fish down here as well, and catch a few of our trout as well. And it's been lovely catching up with you, Stuart, and thank you for being so open, honest and frank about stuff as well. It's been really fascinating discussing subjects that mean a lot to me, that really mean to a lot to you too. So thank you for doing that.
No, thanks for having me, Pete. I've enjoyed it. Open and honest, that's me really. I've just sort of wear my heart on my sleeve a little bit really. It's probably one of my faults really. So hope I've not offended anybody if I've been too controversial in anything I've said. And likewise, I'm sure Matt said the same to you. If you want to come up north anytime, we'd be happy to host you anytime up here.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to that at some stage, and we can go through that. Do we shake hands? Do we hug? Do we put antiseptic stuff on our hands or not? It'll be a nice problem to have anyway. But Stuart Minnikin, thank you so much for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast. It's been brilliant to have Stuart along. I hope you've enjoyed this one too. As ever, there are lots more coming. I hope you're still enjoying these. We're through 70 odd of these now. I thoroughly enjoy talking fishing with people. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this one, and look forward to the next one too. So thanks very much for listening to the Fly Culture podcast. Thank you.